Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to a new video on the channel. Don't forget, if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe down below. And if you get the time, drop a like and drop a comment on the video. I will comment back to every single person. I try and do that on every single video that I bring out. But yeah, today we're talking Shrouded Fable, the newest Pokemon TCG set. Meh is the best way that I would describe it. It didn't have much hype about it before it came out, and the prices that we're seeing of the cards is probably reflecting that to a certain degree. I also think a lot of issue around the set itself is they base it around a very specific Pokemon that if you've not played the most recent game, or even technically not even the most recent expansion, just doesn't have that same oomph, I think. Now, I do have an issue when people sort of seem to think that every single set needs to have Kanto Pokemon in it or Johto Pokemon in it. It's good to see the later generations get some love, but this is, for me, quite a bang average set. And because of that, we're seeing prices drop very, very quickly on almost every single card, except for a couple of exceptions. And I'm going to be investing in some of these cards, not just yet, because there's an issue with the delay in ETBs over in America, and certain places not getting stock. But we'll have a little look at the prices of some of the stuff that's out, basically have a little look at the drop in a lot of cards, and then we'll compare it to some other sets from previous sort of iterations of Scarlet and Violet, and you'll see why I'm not going to buy just yet, but I will be buying some of these cards to hold on to for the long term, maybe get a few of them graded. We'll see what happens, but let's get into it and have a look at Shrouded Fable. Alright, so I'm on TCG Player. Again, just something to bear in mind when it comes to TCG Player. It's great if you are in America. It's very, very relevant to America. It's in dollars, and it does track the American market quite well, but it's not quite the same in the UK. What I tend to say with it is, whatever you see the dollar price be, sort of make that the pound price. So, for example, Cassiopeia being market price of £86, $86, make that about £86 as well. The prices are different in different regions of the world. It is supply, demand, all that sort of stuff. So just bear that in mind. Shrouded Fable is a very small set. Very, very small set. We're going to talk about another small set that came out a while back, and how, in my opinion, they're quite similar in their sort of characteristics. I didn't see anyone really big in this setup before it came out, and after it came out, I've not really seen huge amounts of people looking to complete it. There are a couple of beautiful cards, one that I really want in the PSA 10, a couple that I really want in the PSA 10. But it's reflected in the fact that we are only a week out of basically the release, and the prices aren't really holding up at all. They've all dipped off quite heavily. Having said that, if you compare these to a bigger set, to complete the set, it's actually not that cheap. They are holding up, the illustration rares especially, the ones that are just standard illustration rares, they're doing decently well. If you think to other Scarlet and Violet sets, well, Magikarp, for example, is an illustration rare. It's extremely expensive. You've got like Tyranitar, that's quite expensive, Groudon. But having said that, there aren't that many that hold mad value, and you can see some of these are decent. They're not too bad. The issue is in the way that they've dropped off from where they were. So we'll have a little look at a couple of cards. So Monkey Dory, for example, this card is falling off a cliff very, very quickly. It's basically, if you look at the price here saying 27, I've seen them sell for $23, $24. It's not far off halved in value, which is crazy when you think about it. It's the same for most of the cards that are illustration rares. Cassiopeia, which is obviously the special illustration, this is the big card of the set. Even that has really dropped off quite heavily. It's a great, I think it's a great card. I absolutely love it. A very popular character in the game, but dropped off quite heavily. Now, a lot of people talk about these sets, and I've seen so many YouTubers talk about the price of cards dipping off, and they always say, I'll wait a couple of weeks for a card to drop off in value. It's not necessarily true. Sometimes the cards drop for about a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, and then they start to rebound and bounce back. It's not true for every card. You have to bear that in mind. Just be careful when it comes to buying your cards from Shrouded Fable that you don't get stung on them dipping further. The reason being is that ETBs in the UK, there was talk about it being delayed. I've seen them in the UK everywhere, so it's not so relevant for us. But I think America had quite a lot of delays, and it's not quite out there just yet. I don't think the Pokemon Center ones have shipped yet either. I don't think they ship for a little bit longer. I think they're talking about late August for those now. So there's going to be more supply coming in the form of the ETBs being opened up. Now, a lot of people are opening up the Kingdra EX box, the Greninja EX box, the King Gambit box. You still got the booster bundles to come as well. I do think they will drop further because of this. Where you have a problem with this set is I think there's going to be a decent amount of supply of cards hitting the market. I just don't think the demand is there. Despite the fact that there are some great cards in this. Now, one of my favourite cards from this set is this Cresselia. It is a beautiful card. Absolutely stunning. And you can see it's basically nigh on dropped by about, I think it's about 40%, 30 to 40% it dipped off by. I love this card. I think it's absolutely stunning. But it's going to be packed a lot. And I say it's going to be packed a lot. It's going to be packed a lot relative to the fact that Shrouded Fable has horrendous drop rates, horrendous pull rates. Which I think is a bit of an audacity for a set that's that small. I don't think you can afford to have such poor pull rates. I think it would just annoy people realistically. But this Cresselia, for example, is a beautiful, beautiful card, but it will be packed relatively consistently. So I'm going to wait and hold off to buy, but I'll be buying into a few of these cards. Persian is another one. This is a great card, a really lovely card. There was a lot of demand for it. It's dipped off quite heavily since then, but I will say in the UK, it's actually held up quite well. Price-wise, it's doing okay. It's not dropped off in the same way that it's dropped off over in like America and the other markets. But again, I think this is a card that will get packed a lot, and I think it will dip in value outside of that. Okay. Now, pretty much every card in the set has dipped in that sort of ilk. It's dropped in and around that. There are two cards that have bucked the trend. The first of these is this Horsey. Now, I think one of the major reasons why this card has held up and actually gone up in value overall, ignore the 1.22% there because it really was lower and it's sort of declined overall. I think it's because of the Kingdra promo card. Now, we'll talk about the two promo cards in a second, but I think it's held up quite well because it's sort of part of the same evolution line. I think people want to get this graded as a PSA 10, get the Kingdra graded. I think they'll do quite well in the long term. But I think it's held up quite well because of that. It is a lovely card, but I don't think it's anything special, this Horsey, compared to other cards we've had that are way cheaper than that for other sets. And then the other card, which I think is a fantastic card, is this Houndoom. Absolutely brilliant card. This has really done well. It has really flown up and up and up and up. Kept going up in value from where it was to where it is now. Again, I really like this card, but I won't be buying it just yet because I think, in my opinion, it might have the potential to drop off a little bit before bouncing back further in the long term. We're going to look at so many other sets so you can see the sort of gradual drops and climbs that other cards have, so you can really, I guess, think about your buys before you go in and sort of slam into getting what you want to get for. But what I want to say for Shrouded Fable is, in my opinion, two of the best cards came in the promo boxes. That's the Greninja and the Kingdra. Now, I've opened these up for a video. I bought them while I was in Brussels. There's a Pokemon card hunting video coming out. I bought both of them and I tried to get the best out of them possible because I want to grade them. The Greninja and the Kingdra are both stunning cards, in my opinion. They're two of the best promo cards we've had in a long, long time. You can still pick these cards up quite cheap at the moment at 8-9 quid. And the reason why is because the actual boxes themselves are only sort of 30 quid. Forget the 32 there. You can actually get them for like 26, 27 in the UK quite consistently. They're going to have the ceiling price because you can just go out and buy the box. And also, loads of these boxes have been opened. Because the ETBs didn't drop straight away like they normally do, the major thing that everyone's been opening up has been these Greninja boxes, the Kingdra boxes, those sort of things. So they're actually holding down quite low. Short term, they'll hold low. But in the long term, I think these two cards will do really, really well. And I'll be interested to see the scale of getting PSA 10s. From what I can see, the centering's been a bit of an issue for both cards. So I do think there could be another situation where the Magikarp, like from Powder Evolve, which is so poorly centered on most of the card, has got such a value as a PSA 10. As you guys know, promo cards that sit in plastic and boxes without having this sort of cellophane wrapper around them don't tend to travel very well, and they tend to get damaged. My two, touch wood, look really nice for me, and I'm hoping that I can send them off for PSA 10s. But if you're thinking about an investment, a really nice center Greninja and a Kingdra, I think would be really, really good buys. I don't think you can really go wrong on them if you can get them at the £6-7 mark. I don't think there's any real risk involved in buying them at that. I think they're superb cards. I think they're absolutely beautiful. I think you can get the whole evolution line on sort of Facebook groups for 9-10 quid. It's really not a lot of money at all. But I see a lot of people saying wait, which I think is the right thing to do. I'd wait for the ETBs to come up before you buy anything, before you really get involved in it. And it's really been this sort of theme over time, that cards tend to dip for a period of time after they come out, after a set comes out, and then bounce back and rebound. But you have to understand that there are differences to this. Now, look at Chansey, for example. This is the reason why everyone says to hold out. You can see at 13, dropped down to 11. It did get a bit of a rebound before dropping right back down again. We're talking, just under a month after release. It was at its lowest point. And then it really did rebound really, really well. And climbed really nicely, nearly doubling in market value pretty much, up to where it was before dipping back down again. This is why people say to hold off. Now, Chansey's quite a popular Pokemon, so you can hedge your bets quite well on the Chansey. I'd sort of compare that to the sort of Houndoom, maybe the Horsey to a degree, but I do think this is an anomaly because of the Kingdra. But again, you can see these cards sort of dipping off. It's sort of the 3-week mark, I think, is always the best point to go for. But it's not the same everywhere you go. Carmine, for example, dropped off in the first sort of just over a week and then really rebounded. Now, slightly different because it's a supporter card, but just bear that in mind. Obviously, it's a special illustration as well, so less of a supply of this card. But not every card does drop off to that same level. But Perrin, again, dropped off, was expensive, as we know, dipped off, bounced back really nicely, then gradually dipped before slowly bouncing back again. It doesn't always work out that the card is cheapest at that 3-week mark that everyone talks about, the magic mark. Sometimes they're cheapest in the first week before bouncing back. Kieran, again, cheapest in the first week, got as low as 33. Now look at it, it's absolutely flown from that set, and I do think you have to bear that in mind. Again, these are supporter cards, they're not Pokemon, so it's a bit different. But if you want to look to a Pokemon for that idea, Eevee. Obviously, one of the most popular Pokemons in the TCG. We all know that in the games, Eevee and the evolutions, you only need to look at Evolving Skies to know just how popular they are. But again, lowest really when it first dropped, and even if it had the little drop about a week afterwards, it's then basically risen since then. It's basically made its way up. Now, this is that gradual rise there. This is when it really spiked up at that point. But my point is, if you bought at the sort of 3-week mark, 5 wasn't too bad. The cheapest point was pretty much when it dropped, but we'll forget that one because it's a bit of trepidation there for people that get it. The cheapest point was really that just after a week after it dropped, and then it sort of bounced before really spiking at that point. Obviously, dropped back down again now. It's calmed down, and I'd always be careful about buying into FOMO because you can get stung. But if you buy these cards, these really popular cards, and you guys know what popular Pokemon are, if you buy them at that point, a week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, you're usually pretty well covered. You guys know popular Pokemon, it's important that you understand that. There are cards that buck the trend, but these are very few and far between, and there's a reason for this. Greninja card is absolutely stunning. What a card this is. And it is absolutely flown. It's just kept going up and up and up and up. The pull rates of Twilight Masquerade was so bad that it was inevitably going to rise in value. And I'm annoyed at myself because I wanted one in a PSA 10 and I thought I'd hold off just to see what happened. And they kept going up, and I got to the point where I was just like, do I justify it at the price that it's at? No, not really. Not right now. There's going to be a load of these cards coming back from grading very soon from PSA. They're going to have graded. They're all going to hit the market, and I think we will see a dip in the PSA 10 price. We saw the same with Charizard in 151. We've seen the same in multiple places with the big chase card dipping off once they all hit the market. People sort of struggling to sell them, so they start to undercut each other. That's when I think I'll go and buy my PSA 10 at that point, once a few more of them come back from graded. Temporal Forces, again, if you look at it, it's held up quite well in value. It's not too bad, but I just want to show you this, right? This is Temporal Forces. And if we look at Temporal Forces, this was quite a popular set. If you flick down the page, we get down to the £13 and the $12 quite quickly. And again, it's not really hugely different to Shrouded Fable. So for all the talk about it not being that popular of a set, it's held up. Shrouded Fable's held up relatively well so far. This obviously is now a long way down the line of Temporal Forces being out. But if we look at some of the Temporal Forces cards, again, the cheapest point for a lot of these cards was that initial sort of early stage of the release before it started to climb and bounce. And after that, it's not the same thing. People seem to think that it's really, really simplistic and go, oh, it goes up in value and it drops off by 3 weeks in. Not always. Sometimes these cards hold up. They do tend to dip off later on down the line. The reason that I believe this to be the case is early doors, everyone is trying to complete the master set. the hype then dies down a little bit as people then move on to new sets or new cards and stuff like that. When we look at these cards like in Twilight Masquerade and whatnot, the value's still there for Twilight Masquerade, in my opinion, purely because the Greninja's there. I just think it's a set that everyone wants to complete. They really, really want to complete it. So it's just one of those things. Again, if we look at the Immortals Conviction, again, when this set first came out, the dip off in price, bounce back, it dipped off very heavily since then. Again, this was a card predicted to do really, really well. But again, it didn't do that. So you have to understand there are anomalies to this. Ghastly, really popular Pokemon. And again, same sort of situation as the EV. Cheap. It goes to 6 months realistically, because that's probably more of an accurate reflection of it. But cheap. It bounces back and climbs. And it's important to understand that. I'm looking at 3 months because I'm just trying to compare them at the moment to Twilight Masquerade. But if we go further back, you can see, look at this spike for Morty. He absolutely flew at the beginning. Never expected him to be this really expensive card, but he dipped off so quickly. And again, the dealing, you can see a similar. If we go to 6 months from this, again, dip off, bounce back. The dip off there is a fair while afterwards, and then starts to climb again. The Walking Wake, again, if we look at the 6 months on this, highest there, dipped off really heavily. I'm going to pull this away there. Dipped off really heavily, well after that point of the three-week rule that everyone sort of likes to give, and then before bouncing back again. And I think that's it. What I will show you for Temporal Forces. So the takeaways from this is, in my opinion, there is no hard and fast rule. You have to base it upon the specific set at that moment in time. The reason why I'm saying hold off on the Shrouded Fable is because the ETBs haven't hit every market yet, and I think you need that supply with the booster bundles as well to really get an idea of where the card value is. Having said that, stuff like Temporal Forces, for example, they did dip off, and some of them are... It's not the 3-week period here. You can see, look how late that is, that it's got to its lowest point. But you do cover yourself a little bit by buying at that point. But I think you have to base it upon each set individually. I really like the 2 promo cards, I've got to be honest with you. The Persian, I think, will do well, but I'm going to let this come down. I think it's going to come down in value. I think the Horsey will hold up quite well. I think the Houndoom will do really well, but again, I'm going to wait for the ETBs. And the set that I really compare Shrouded Fable to the most is Obsidian Flames. They're very similar in terms of size. They are different, but if you think about Obsidian Flames, it was really based around Charizard. The Shrouded Fable is based around those Monkadori sort of cards, the cards that are very specific to the expansion. I would just bear that in mind. I think they're very, very similar cards. And if we look at the Charizard, when it first sort of had its day, I guess, it just gradually dropped from there. It just gradually dropped from there and kept going down. Having said that, in a PSA 10, it's very, very expensive. So just bear that in mind. And then the Ninetales, for example, dipped off for a long period of time before eventually people started to pick it up and like it as a card. In a PSA 10, it's got decent value to it. But these smaller sets, I do worry about them. I just don't think the hype about them is the same level of hype that people had for other sets. I just want to see the year-to-date for Pidgeot, for example. If we look at the year-to-date, again, gradually down, before rebounding ever so slightly. Where I think you can cover yourself off best with these cards is, for me, I'm not interested in Shrouded Fable really at all. I don't like it as a set. It's not something that I think is great. It's got some nice artworks and some really good artworks, but I just don't really care for it that much. Where I'm interested is in the PSA 10 side of things. I'm going to get some of the cheaper cards, some of the cards that I like, some of the popular cards, and grade them myself and try and get 10s in them. I think that's where they'll have value, because a lot of the Obsidian Flames cards, a lot of the other cards that have come out for other sets that maybe have people aren't completing the whole set but have a demand, they've done really well as PSA 10. So that's where I think I'm going to be basing myself. I'm going to look to pick up these cards gradable in a PSA 10, get some of them sent off, hopefully get them graded high, and then that's where I think the value will be in them. There's cards that I want to keep. I want to keep a Greninja, I want to keep a Kingdra, I want them for my collection. But again, as always, if I can make a bit of money while selling off a few cards to put towards the rest of my collection, then I'm going to go ahead and do that. All in all, the simple sort of advice I can give you guys is hold off on Shrouded Fable at the moment. I think we've got a drop still to come. I don't think they've hit the floor, their bottom yet. But it's important you guys understand this 3-week rule that some YouTubers seem to go by and swear by isn't always the case. And you just have to bear that in mind. Sometimes you've got to use your own knowledge. You look at what's got hype, what doesn't have hype, and understand that sometimes it's not as simplistic as that. It's really not as simplistic as that. Illustration rares, you can tend to have that mindset to those cards because obviously they're packed a bit more often than say special illustrations are. But I'd still be a little bit careful and just bear in mind that a basic rule that I've always had is it's better to spend more on a card later on down the line than it is to lose loads on loads of cards that you bought early because you're worried about the fact that they might go up in value. So just bear that in mind a little bit. Don't rush in. The 3-week rule is not hard and fast. It sometimes can be earlier than that to buy in. It sometimes can be later than that to buy in. You just got to keep an eye on the market. There's not a lot of cards in this set. It's not hard to keep an eye on it, realistically. You can just keep an eye each day and just see if they've come down further, And when you see them start to jump up a little bit, you can think maybe actually now's the time for me to get involved. If you look at the Houndoom, difficult to see from this graph because obviously it climbed, but 19, again, you saw it start to rise. You might go, actually, I'm happy at that price. I'm going to go and buy my Houndoom now. It's really differs per card, but Houndoom is a popular Pokemon, so just bear that in mind. But that's Shrouded Fable in a nutshell at the moment. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts and what you guys think about Shrouded Fable. Drop them in the comments down below. Hopefully there is a bit of a rebound on some of these cards in the long term. I still think there's a bit of a drop to come on them realistically, but it'll be interesting to see. Cassiopeia is the one that I'm really intrigued by because I think it's a great card. It's a very popular character. So I'm interested to see what that Cassiopeia does in the short to long term. And see if it does dip down like a lot of the cards like Morty's Conviction and stuff like that did. If you're new around here, make sure you subscribe down below, drop a like, drop a comment. It all makes a massive difference to the channel if you start on this new journey. But for now, I'm out. Peace out. I'll speak to you soon.